Yeah, I've been hearing you on the radio talking about the cold weather. You're a warm weather guy, huh? You like it
I'm
warm, yeah.
very, very thin blood. Even though I was born in New York, I left when I was a kid, grew up in Florida.
Uh-huh.
Only worked 1 year above the Mason-Dixon line, and that was in Des Moines, Iowa, back in 1988. I did not like it at all. Moved there in January of 1988, and people in Iowa, they live with it every day. I had no idea what these people were doing. So, for us in Phoenix, by our standards, I've lived down here. My wife and kids, we moved here from Dallas
Mhm.
in 2008. And in that time, this by far has been the coldest winter we've had by Arizona standards, probably 15 degrees below normal. So, it finally got back to what it's normally like for a longer stretch of time. Hopefully that'll continue to the end until we break camp on the 25th.
Yeah.
Vince, I grew up in Chicago, so I was used to all the warm weather. After being here for like 8 years now, whenever it dips, below 55 degrees, I'm just like, oh, it's so horrible. Why? So you
Exactly.
you lose that resistance to the cold weather real fast.
No doubt.
So Vince, yeah, I wanted to ask about so growing up in Florida, where did you grow up in Florida? And there were no teams there, so who was like your team? Like, who were you listening to? Like, who were your influences? You know?
Well, that's a great question. I grew up in Orlando.
Uh-huh.
My dad got transferred as a civilian working for the Navy from Long Island, New York, down to Orlando. So I moved down there in the mid 60s. And I was a Yankee fan just growing up, just
Mhm.
because I was a part of a New York household.
Mhm.
My dad was I'm Jets and Rangers and and Yankees. And my dad was Giants and Rangers and didn't. And he was a Dodger fan, a Brooklyn Dodger fan. Never forgave them for leaving when he lived there. He watched Babe Ruth play when he was a kid, so coached all of his sons. I'm the youngest of four sons. Coached them all in baseball. So the sport has always been very, very dear to us. And you're right. I didn't really, I listen to some guys that do what we do and so fortunate to do it. And they say, I grew up listening to
Uh-huh.
Harry Carey or Jack Buck or, to take your pick, Vince Scully, of course, you know,
Mhm.
Bill King, John Miller.
Mhm.
I didn't have those influences growing up. So for us, the weekends were Atlanta Braves baseball before the
Yeah.
Superstation. And it was on an independent station out of St. Petersburg. So we would go to the beach on Sundays and I'd come home. It was WTOJ TD 44. And I'd see, Buzz Capra and Dale Murphy and, all those kinds of players back in the day, Rick Mailer, and watch those games. And Milo Hamilton was doing the games with Ernie Johnson. And as it turns out, my first big league job was alongside Milo Hamilton. So it
Oh,
was
that's so cool.
pretty surreal how all that kind of came together. So I didn't really have an influence. I knew
Yeah.
I wanted to do it as a kid. Thurman Munson was my favorite player, and I knew very early I was not going to be Thurman Munson. The catcher, I wore number 15, the whole 9 yards. First games we saw were the Yankees against the Royals. When we went
Mhm.
back to New York for a family funeral, as it turned out, one of my grandparents had passed away. My dad took us to Shea Stadium because the Yankees Stadium was under renovation in 74 and
Interesting.
75. Yeah, so we saw the Royals play. Rory White had 4 hits in the game. I remember that. And it was just a big deal. I mean, that was the first big league game I saw in person. Then we had spring training in Orlando with the Minnesota Twins, and I go to a couple of those games and see that. And then
Mhm.
went to school at Central Florida when it was about as big as the room I'm sitting in. But they gave us, we had a college radio station that you couldn't hear outside of this room. But we had a collection of people, whether it was news or sports or music, entertainment. We all took it so seriously. We had a great time, and I'm still close friends with many of those folks that were together back in the late 70s, early 80s. And that's where I got to learn play by play doing baseball and basketball and football and
Mhm.
hockey, or not hockey, but, some wrestling, some soccer, some volleyball, whatever it took. We put it on the air and just made all of our mistakes, cut our teeth, got an internship at NBC in New York. Out of that, just simply on a whim, with a phone call. I always tell students when I talk to them that are on the verge of making decisions about internships, say always start at the top. Let them tell you no and
Mhm.
work your way down the list. And that's what I did. I was lucky that my first call was a yes. And I don't know why it happened, but it did. I was supposed to be with Marv Albert. He was my idol growing up because when we went back for that that funeral back in '74, my cousin Vito, who still lives in the same apartment from 1974, he's
rent controlled.
1 year older than me, in Brooklyn, and they would watch the Knicks on television, turn down the sound, and turn on Marv Albert on radio when he was doing it back in the heyday, when Marv was the voice of the Rangers and the Knicks on radio. And I was just enthralled with that they felt so strongly about an identification with this person. They wanted this person to deliver, what they're about to watch. So that's kind of how it all got started. And I went to New York. It didn't work out with Marv because it was the summer of '81. It was the strike of '81 with the baseball strike. So I went to the radio side, which turned out to be okay. I worked with a gentleman named Mark Mason, who basically was part of the group that founded WFAN in New York, not too far after that, and got some great experience, made some great contacts, got to go to the Olympics because of that, with some of those NBC people in Seoul, Korea in 1988. And just, I was very lucky from a guy that didn't know much, didn't have that influence growing up that I could listen to and rely on, to where I got a chance to get a jump on what's been a very thankful and satisfying career so far.
Well, Hal's a Chicago guy. Like the Iowa Cubs, they're like a big deal over there, right? Like it's like a fun franchise, right? And I saw you were minor league broadcaster of the year over there. Was that kind of like a big year for you? '88. You said you went to the Olympics as well. Was that a kind of breakthrough for your career? Yeah.
It just kind of came out of nowhere. One that it was the first ever they created this award. I went to the national baseball meetings in Atlanta. I accepted the award at one of the big luncheons that they had. And from that, I went to the Olympics. I was a finalist for a New York Mets job, which Gary Cohen got. And I knew Gary that year. He was in Pawtucket. I was in Iowa. Joe Buck was in Louisville. I was in Iowa. I don't know whatever happened to Joe. I don't know if he ever went on to do anything.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard from him since. Yeah,
because Gary was already.
I heard he was working for his dad or something, but
yeah, he was. Gary was already filling in for Bob Murphy on Mets radio. Yeah. And so I told him, he goes, "Man, you just got this award. You're going to the Olympics." I go, "Dude, unless you're axe murdering somebody between now and opening day, the job is yours." But it was a great experience to fly to New York, to go through the interview process, to actually try to attempt to do a game off of a television monitor. That was part of their process. It was just a very, very unique experience. And from there, I moved down to Tucson, spent 2 years in Tucson with the Astros AAA club. That's where I met my wife, Veronica, who's in Tucson as we speak, with her sisters. We've been married 31 years now, 3 healthy, wonderful kids. So it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah, and when do you remember the first time you met Ken? Because it was during that Tucson stint that I was reading on your Wikipedia page. Is that right? Is that where you met Ken? Because he was with Las Vegas. Is that right?
I'm glad somebody's reading this page, because I certainly don't. But yeah, because he was in Vegas and I was in Tucson. Yeah. So we certainly knew each other. Rich Waltz was his partner back then as well, who's actually doing some of the WBC this year on Fox. So yeah, that's where I first met Ken. And started a little bit of that relationship, which I tell people all the time. You just don't know at what point in your life that relationship is going to come back and lift you up and maybe give you an opportunity that you didn't necessarily see coming. And with the passing of Bill, we had known each other at that point. Then after that '91, I went to the Astros. He did some filling with the Orioles. Then he went on to do Oakland, and I was still in Houston, and then went on to Texas. Saw each other then, saw his daughter, Emily, who's now 30 years old. I saw her when she was like 3 years old. So, and his wife, Denise. So it was a long, it was a long relationship, a long friendship. And I was out of baseball for 2 years. And when Bill passed away, several folks from the A's had contacted me and said, "You're somebody we're really interested in." And I told Ken, I said, "Look, I'm going to apply for the job. I'm not asking for you to endorse me in any way, shape, or form. It's a tough position to be in for you, because you're getting inundated from former partners and guys that like myself in the business. I'm just letting you know that it's there." And through the process, our familiarity, his familiarity with my work ethic, and it just kind of all came together. And fortunately, it's going to be my 18th year with Ken, and couldn't be more thankful. It's been a great partnership. I've learned a lot from Ken. He's got the voice of God. That's not something I don't have, but I make the most of my situation. And we both had some great moments along the years. It's a little lean right now, but we've had some great memories together in that booth. And when I first got to Oakland, my first broadcast in spring training, because Bill had passed away in October, didn't get, he never got a chance to say goodbye. Fans never got a chance to say goodbye to him. And I went on the air. I said, look, I'm not Bill King. I will never pretend to be Bill King. I'm going to be Vince. Hopefully over time, I know this is very difficult for you, and there is a voice that's lacking in your life. And I've been asked to step in on a small basis and fill in some of those blanks. Just please be patient. Hopefully as you're going out to get a gallon of milk, you'll hear the score more than once. And as time goes on, you'll begin to hopefully enjoy the stories, enjoy my play-by-play, just enjoy my personality, my togetherness with Ken. And we can hopefully build a partnership. And it took time, as it should, because with Bill, who's one of the greatest of all time, not only in baseball, but in so many sports, and you're the person that's stepping into that booth, not in his chair, but into his booth. Yeah. You just have to be. I mean, I was very respectful of what I was doing, and very thankful that I swore when I got into this business. No offense to California, but I couldn't live full time in California, especially with a wife and 3 young kids at the time. I said I would never work for a California team. I worked for a California team longer than anybody else, and I'm so thankful that this opportunity's presented itself. So many thanks to the East Bay fans, Oakland fans, and the Oakland community.
Yeah, and you mentioned fraternity. I always thought like the A's radio fraternity is pretty amazing. Like over the decades, Monty Moore, Lon Simmons, Bill King, Ray Fosse, Ken Korak, and you. I mean, what's it like to be part of that group? Just so many greats over generations.
Well, it's humbling, obviously. Yeah. I love Monty to death. I wish I saw more of him. I wish I could see more of him at the ballpark. Still has tremendous energy and tremendous love for the Astros or for the A's, and all the people that you mentioned along the way. It is a booth that that has a lot of history, and thankful, because listening to games from the A's perspective, much like the clubhouse, it's different. You're not going to hear this kind of broadcast in Chicago or St. Louis or Atlanta. Or even Baltimore. It's a unique vibe that we're able to use from the clubhouse and use from the history that's inside that booth and bring that out. I think fans appreciate that. Fans appreciate that we don't root. They know that I work for the A's. I don't root on the air. They'll tell by my voice if the A's are winning or losing, and I think that's good enough. I'll certainly provide the excitement when those opportunities present itself, like Hamilton drops the ball, or things of that nature. Brandon Moss, Grand Slam, walk-off capital of baseball, that kind of stuff. I mean, that's there, and it's genuine. But when the A's make a bad play, or when the opposing team makes good plays, you acknowledge that. You tip your cap to that, because that's part of recognizing just good, clean baseball.